I won $50 million on a Tuesday night. Still feels unreal to say that out loud. One minute I was sitting alone at our tiny kitchen table, bills spread out like a punishment, my dinner getting cold. The next minute, my shaking fingers were tracing the numbers on a lottery ticket, matching them one by one with the numbers on the screen. First number matched. Second number matched. By the sixth number I couldn't breathe. I checked the ticket 3 times. Then 5. Then 10. I took a photo and zoomed in. I opened the lottery website, entered the code, and stared as the confirmation flashed on the screen. Jackpot winner. $50 million. I didn't scream. I didn't jump. I just went completely quiet inside, like someone had pressed mute on my life. I thought of our debts. The credit cards. The rent always 1 week late. My mother's medicine. The car that coughed every time it tried to start. Then I thought of my husband, Daniel. Daniel, who always told me, "Things will get better, babe. We just have to keep going." Daniel, who worked late almost every night at the office. Daniel, who, in my eyes, had carried us on his back for years. I imagined walking into his office with balloons, maybe a cake, maybe a silly t-shirt saying, "My wife is rich." I imagined his face lighting up, his co-workers cheering, everyone clapping while I told him, "We're free. You don't have to work yourself to death anymore." My hands were still trembling as I grabbed my phone. I almost called him. My thumb hovered over his name on the screen. Then I pulled back. Whoa. I wanted to see his reaction. I wanted to give him that surprise in person. Felt like we both deserved that moment. I put the ticket into a plastic folder, slipped it into my old handbag, and hid it under the laundry in our bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered to myself, "Tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll go to the office and tell him. Tomorrow our life changes." At that moment, I had no idea that the office I was planning to walk into was the same place that would destroy the image I had of my husband. And I definitely didn't know that the noises I'd hear behind his office door would break my heart before the money ever had a chance to change our lives. To understand why that day cut so deep, you need to know who I thought we were. Daniel and I met when we were both broke, tired, and hopeful. I worked at a small bakery, waking up at 4 a.m. to bake bread for people who would never learn my name. Daniel worked in an office doing something with accounts and clients and targets. I never fully understood his job, but I understood his exhaustion. We married in a simple ceremony. No big wedding, no expensive dress. Just a rented room, a borrowed white dress, cheap flowers, and a man looking at me like I was the only person in the world. We promised each other that one day we'd look back and laugh at how poor we were. But life didn't get easier. Prices went up. His salary stayed almost the same. Mine barely changed. We didn't have kids because we were always waiting for a better time. Somehow that better time never arrived. Instead, what arrived were late notices, calls from banks, nights where we pretended we weren't hungry so the other person would eat more. Through all that, I believed we were a team. Yes, Daniel complained. He snapped sometimes. He'd say things like, "You're always buying useless stuff," when I bought dish soap on discount. But I always told myself he was just stressed. He was under pressure. He was tired. He started working late more often. First, it made sense. He was chasing a promotion. He wanted to give us a better life. He said his boss was demanding, that the company was cutting people, that he needed to look indispensable. I remember one night when he came in at midnight, tie loosened, eyes heavy. I tried to hug him and he just collapsed on the couch and said, "I'm doing all of this for us. Please don't make it harder by questioning me." So I stopped questioning. I trusted him. Sometimes I'd hear him on the phone in the bathroom with the door closed. When I asked who it was, he'd say, "Work stuff you wouldn't understand," and change the subject. Again, I let it go. I told myself, he's a good man. He's struggling, but he loves you. You're lucky to have him. When I bought that lottery ticket, it wasn't for me alone. I imagined his back finally straightening, his shoulders relaxing, that tired line on his forehead disappearing. I imagined him waking up one day without an alarm, without panic, without worry. I thought maybe money would finally let us become the happy couple we were supposed to be. Looking back, I realized something ugly. Money doesn't create loyalty or love. It just shines a bright light on what is already there. I just hadn't seen the shadow yet. The morning after I found out about the win, the world looked different. Not brighter, not louder, just different. It's strange how people can walk past you on the street with no idea that your whole life just changed. I looked at strangers' faces, wondering what they'd do with $50 million. Buy a house, travel, quit their job and never look back. Me. I just wanted security. A home that didn't smell like damp walls. A life where my husband didn't come home looking crushed. I waited until mid-morning, when I knew Daniel would be deep into his workday. I told him on text that I'd be running some errands. He replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji. My heart beat faster as I dressed. I picked a simple dress, nothing fancy. I didn't want him to wonder why I was all dressed up. I put the lottery ticket folder into my bag, pressing it flat with my hand like I was afraid it might fly away. I took a deep breath, locked the door and walked to the bus stop. On the ride, I rehearsed what I'd say. Daniel, you won't believe this. Sit down, you need to hear this. Our life is never going to be the same. I pictured him crying. I pictured him lifting me up and spinning me around. I pictured us leaving his office hand in hand, walking out together, not looking back. By the time I reached his building, my anxiety had turned into excitement. His office tower was tall and full of glass, the kind of place that made me feel small. The lobby smelled like coffee and perfume and something else, ambition maybe. I checked in at the front desk. Hi, I'm here to see Daniel Summers, I said. The receptionist glanced up, then smiled politely. Of course. He's on the 8th floor. You can take the elevator. My palms were sweating as I pressed the button. Each floor felt slower than the last. When the doors opened, I stepped into a quiet hallway with gray carpet and soft lighting. I'd been here only once years ago, when his company had a family day. Felt different now. Colder. I walked down the hallway toward his office, noticing how the doors had nameplates. Some were open, some were closed. I heard typing, low conversations, a phone ringing faintly. Then, as I turned the corner to where Daniel's office was, something hit me. Laughter. Loud, sharp laughter. A woman's voice. A man's voice. Glasses clinking. Music faint but definitely there. Froze. Why would there be music in Daniel's office in the middle of the day? I stepped closer, my heels sinking into the carpet, heart pounding so loud I could almost hear it. The door to his office was closed, but the sound leaked out. Laughing murmurs and then, my name. Emma is so clueless. I stopped breathing. Name. My husband's voice. A woman laughing in response. And if she ever does win, he continued, you know I'll make sure it's in my control. She trusts me with everything. My hand clenched around my bag. I was standing there, inches from the door, holding a ticket worth $50 million. And I was listening to my husband talk about me like a joke. Something inside me went cold. I didn't knock. I stepped back, swallowed hard, and silently leaned closer to the door, needing to hear more. Even though every part of me already knew that whatever came next would hurt. I had planned to walk in with a surprise. Instead, I found myself hiding in the hallway, listening in on a conversation that would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Relax, I heard Daniel say, his tone smooth, almost amused. She plays the lottery like it's a fairy tale. If something big ever happens, I'm the one who'll handle it. The woman laughed again, a low, familiar kind of laugh. I realized with a sick twist in my stomach that I'd heard it once before on speakerphone when he said it was a colleague. So what's your plan? She asked. You act like you've got it all figured out. I do, Daniel replied. We're married. Joint accounts. She doesn't know anything about money. I could make a few calls, move a few things, and she'd never see a cent without me. My chest tightened. There was a clink of glass. Maybe he was toasting. Maybe they were celebrating. And if she refuses? The woman asked. Daniel snorted. Emma. Refuse. She's too soft. She feels guilty buying herself new shoes. She'd panic at the idea of messing with finances. If she gives me trouble, I'll just remind her of everything I've done for us. She folds every time. My throat burned. It was like he was describing a stranger. A weak, foolish woman he could push around. Not his wife. Not his partner. Besides, he added casually, I'm already talking to a lawyer. Just in case. A lawyer, she echoed. For what? Options, he said. If a big amount lands in our lap and she suddenly grows a spine. Well, there are ways to direct things. Maybe show she's irresponsible. Emotional. Not fit to manage large sums. Courts love that story. I felt like I'd been punched. He was planning for a future where I was the problem, where he had to protect the money from me. The woman's voice softened. You really think she'd ever win something big? Daniel chuckled. Probably not. She's lucky if she gets 3 numbers. But hey, if she did. Well, let's just say I'd finally get what I deserve after putting up with this marriage. Putting up with this marriage. Every word cut deeper than the last. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of these glass doors and name tags and fake smiles. There was a rustling sound, then a soft moan. I swallowed hard. I still can't believe you're going home to her every night, the woman murmured. My heart stopped. I didn't need to see what was happening inside that room. The sound said enough. Pause. The way her voice had changed. The way his seemed lower, closer. I bit my lip so hard I tasted metal. I stepped back from the door like it had burned me. In less than 3 minutes, everything had flipped. The man I wanted to surprise with a $50 million blessing. The man I thought I was saving. Was drinking in his office in the middle of the day. Planning how to control money I didn't even know I'd win yet. And touching someone who wasn't me. And the worst part. He was speaking about me like I was an obstacle. Joke. A soft, weak woman he kept around until something better came along. My hand shook as I rummaged in my bag and pulled out my phone. I didn't think, I just acted. I opened the voice recorder app and hit record, holding the phone near the door. If Daniel wanted to turn me into a story in some lawyer's office, I would make sure I had a story of my own. The conversation inside kept going. So once things are in my name, Daniel said, we'll be set. You and me. New place. New life. No more pretending. And Emma? The woman asked. He paused. Then he laughed softly. She'll be fine. People like her always survive. They just cry, move somewhere small and get over it. The recording app timer kept ticking up, second by second, as my life quietly fell apart in that hallway. Finally I stopped it. Saved it. Heart racing, hands cold, I turned and walked away as calmly as I could. I had come here to give my husband a gift. Instead, I left with proof that my husband was already preparing to erase me from the life we hadn't even had the chance to build. The walk out of that building felt longer than my entire marriage. The elevator doors closed and my reflection stared back at me. Pale, stunned, holding a bag that contained a ticket worth $50 million and a phone that held a voice recording worth much more than that. As I stepped outside, the air hit my face, cold and sharp. People passed me, talking on their phones, laughing, complaining about traffic. Life was still going on like nothing had happened. But inside me, something had cracked wide open. I walked past a cafe where couples sat sharing pastries. A woman with a baby stroller smiled at her child. A man in a suit rushed past, cursing into his headset. Do they know? Thought. Do they know that, in one tiny office up there, 2 people just built a future by tearing mine apart? I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm back upstairs, kick the door open, throw the ticket in his face and shout, "Here! This is what you thought you'd steal from me." I wanted her to see me. I wanted him to see me. Not as a weak, clueless woman, but as the person who held all the power now. But I didn't do any of that. Because for the first time in a long time I realized something important. Daniel was counting on me to react emotionally. To fall apart. Yell. to make a scene. If I did that, I'd become exactly what he'd told that woman I was: emotional, irrational, not fit to manage large sums. Well, not this time. So instead I walked. I walked past our bus stop and kept going. I needed time. I needed distance. I needed to think like a person who had something to protect, not something to lose. I found a bench in a quiet park and sat down. The trees swayed gently. A child laughed somewhere nearby. I pulled out the lottery ticket folder and stared at it. $50 million. I opened my phone and played back a piece of the recording, just enough to remind myself that this wasn't some nightmare I'd imagined. She's too soft. She folds every time. Ugh. That was the word that stuck. Maybe I had been. Maybe I had forgiven too easily. Maybe I had trusted too blindly. Maybe I had believed in a version of us that only existed in my head. But now I was something else. Slowly, something new spread through me. Not rage, not despair, but a calm, cold clarity. This ticket was mine. I had bought it. I had checked the numbers. My name would go on the claim, not his. And the marriage license he kept hiding behind did not give him the right to own my future. He thought he could handle me. He thought he'd get a lawyer first. He thought I wouldn't know what to do. He was wrong. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "You're not going to scream. You're not going to cry in front of him. You're going to be smart." Right there on that park bench I made 3 decisions. I would claim the money in my name only. And I would do it before he ever knew it existed. I would speak to a lawyer, my own lawyer, before he had a chance to speak for me. I would not tell Daniel what I knew. Not yet. He wanted to play me like I was weak and helpless. Fine. Let him think that. Let him underestimate me. Because if he had a plan, I was about to create a better one. The next few days were some of the hardest of my life. Not because of what I had to do, but because of what I had to pretend. Home I was the same Emma. I cooked dinner. I asked how his day went. I laughed at his jokes. I listened to him complain about coworkers. I watched him scroll on his phone, smiling at messages I knew weren't from the office. Every time he kissed my forehead and said, "Good night, babe," I had to stop myself from pulling away. But inside, the version of me he mocked at the office was gone. In her place was a woman counting every move. On the second day after the win, I went to the lottery office alone. I dressed simply, pulled my hair back, and carried the ticket folder in both hands, like it might disappear if I let go. The process was slower than in movies. There were forms, ID checks, a verification process, smiles that felt real, questions about whether I wanted to go public or remain anonymous. "Anonymous," I said immediately. The official nodded. "We'll wire the funds based on your instructions. We recommend speaking to a financial advisor." "I already have a plan," I lied, even though I didn't yet. By the time I walked out, the gears were officially turning. $50 million were on their way into accounts that would be tied to my name, not ours. That night, I told Daniel I was tired and went to bed early. In reality, I lay in the dark with my phone under the blanket, searching for lawyers and financial planners experienced in large lottery wins and complicated marriages. I found one firm that stood out, not flashy but serious. Their website talked about protecting assets, complex relationship dynamics, and quiet planning. I sent them a message. Within a day, I was sitting in their office. The lawyer, a calm woman named Sarah, listened to my story, the ticket, the recording, the conversations about lawyers and control. I watched her eyes harden slightly when I played back the audio clip. "This is not just about money," she said. "It's about power. He thinks you don't have any." "I guess I do now," I replied softly. She nodded. "You do. And we're going to use it wisely." We spent hours going over options. Could he claim half? What if he filed first? What if he tried to say I was unstable? What if he tried to show I was too emotional to handle money? Sarah laid out a path. Open accounts in my name only, under guidance. Create a trust with a neutral trustee. Slowly move my personal belongings and important documents into a safe place. Do not confront him yet. Do not change my behavior suddenly. Let him get comfortable, she advised. Let him think things are exactly how he imagined. The more he underestimates you, the more careless he'll be. I walked out of that office with something more powerful than the lottery ticket. A plan. Over the next few weeks, while Daniel continued his late nights, I made my own moves. I visited a bank he didn't know about. I set up a trust in my maiden name. I spoke to a financial advisor about investments, donations, and long-term security. I even visited a small apartment on the other side of town. Quiet, bright, with a lock only I would have the key to. At home, when Daniel complained about being broke or joked about what he'd do if we ever got rich, I kept my head down, folded laundry, and nodded. One night, as I was washing dishes, he came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. You know, he said, voice light, if we ever landed a big amount, you'd let me handle it, right? I mean, you hate numbers. I stared at the soapy water. Of course, I said quietly. You've always handled things. He kissed my cheek and walked away, completely unaware that, miles away, a lawyer had already filed the papers that would make sure he'd never touch that money. He thought he was in control. He had no idea the ground beneath him was already moving. The turning point came faster than I expected. One afternoon, Sarah called. He's made a move, she said. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? He contacted a lawyer, she explained. A colleague of mine. He inquired about what would happen if his unstable wife suddenly came into a large sum of money. Your name was mentioned. Closed my eyes. Course. Just like he'd bragged in that office. He really thought he was 3 steps ahead. What do we do? Yes. We let him think he's winning, she replied calmly. Then we invite him to a conversation he thinks he controls, and we take that control away. The plan was simple but brutal. Sarah suggested we invite Daniel to what he'd believe was a financial planning meeting for our future. He'd think it was his idea, that he was being responsible. In reality, it would be a meeting room at her firm with documentation, timelines, and that precious recording ready to play. I knew Daniel well enough to know how to bait the hook. That evening, as he sat on the couch scrolling, I sat beside him, nervously twisting my fingers. Daniel, I said quietly, can I ask you something? He turned, distracted. If we ever got lucky, I mean really lucky, like life-changing money. I let my voice shake a little. Would you help me manage it? I don't want to mess anything up. His eyes flickered. He tried to hide it, but I saw the spark, the one that said, this is it. It's happening. My big chance. Of course, he said, putting his phone down. You know I'd take care of everything. Why are you asking? I don't know, I whispered. I've just been thinking a lot. Maybe we should talk to a professional together. Someone who can guide us if anything ever did happen. He nodded slowly. That's actually smart, babe. I can look into some firms. I already found one, I said, forcing a small smile. I saved up for a consultation, just in case our luck changes. Would you come with me? Just to be prepared. He smiled, smug and satisfied. See, that's why you need me. You panic, I stay calm. Yeah, sure. Book something. I'll help you. He had no idea the meeting was already booked. No idea that the lawyer who thought he was calling to get ahead already knew my side of the story. No idea that the table he'd sit at would not be set for his victory. On the day of the meeting, he wore his nicest shirt. He even put on the watch I'd given him for our anniversary, the one he claimed he didn't like because it looked cheap. In the elevator to the firm's office, he squeezed my hand. Don't stress, he said with a small laugh. This is just a smart move. If something big happens, we'll already be ready. And I'll take the lead, okay? You just agree to what I say. I looked at him and smiled faintly. Okay, I said. I'll let you talk. When we entered the conference room, Sarah was seated at the head of the table, files neat, expression calm. Daniel shook her hand with the confidence of a man who thought he was about to gain control of something precious. Thanks for meeting with us, he said. My wife here. Well, she's a dreamer. Plays the lottery, talks about miracles. I'm the practical one. Sarah nodded, completely unfazed. Of course, she replied. Let's talk about dreams then. And what happens when they come true? He didn't notice the way she glanced at me. He didn't notice the extra chair in the corner, the small recording device on the table, the file with his name already printed on it. He was too busy getting comfortable in a room he didn't realize was built for his fall. The first 10 minutes of the meeting went exactly the way Daniel wanted. He talked a lot. He explained how I didn't understand math, how I got overwhelmed by paperwork, how I needed someone to make rational decisions for me. He spoke about protecting our assets, in a way that made it sound noble instead of controlling. I sat there, hands folded, eyes down, letting him build the version of me he wanted to sell. Sarah listened patiently, taking notes. When he paused, she leaned back and asked a simple question. So Daniel, she said, just to be clear, if your wife were to receive a large sum of money, what exactly would you want your role to be? He smiled. Full management. I'd handle the accounts, the investments, the property. She'd have access, of course, but through you, Sarah finished. Right, he agreed. She trusts me. I know what to do. She'd panic. Sarah looked at me. Is that how you feel, Emma? Do you panic when it comes to money? I lifted my eyes, held her gaze, and then slowly turned to look at my husband. No, I said softly. Not anymore. He frowned, confused. What's that supposed to mean? Sarah placed her pen down. It means, she said calmly, that your wife has already handled a very large sum of money. Quietly, reasonably, without panic. Daniel laughed, a dry, disbelieving sound. What are you talking about? I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Not the lottery one. A different one. This one held confirmation statements, bank setup documents, trust paperwork, and the official notification of funds. I slid it across the table toward him. He opened it, scanning quickly. His face changed. What is this? He whispered. It's proof, I said, my voice steady. Proof that I won $50 million. That I claimed it in my name. That I created a trust. That I hired a lawyer. That I did everything you assumed I was too weak to do. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. You what? I won, I repeated. Weeks ago. The night I sat at our kitchen table and you told me we'd never catch a break. The color drained from his face. You didn't tell me, he hissed. I held his gaze. No, I didn't. Sarah folded her hands. Before you say anything else, she said, calm but firm, there's something you both should hear. She pressed a button on the small device sitting on the table. For a moment there was silence. Then, clear as day, his voice filled the room. She's too soft. She folds every time. Daniel froze. His eyes darted to the device, then to me, then to Sarah. The recording continued. His laughter, his plans, the way he spoke about me, the mention of the lawyer, the idea of proving I was unstable. The room felt colder with every word. When it ended, no one spoke. Finally, Daniel stuttered. You recorded me? That's illegal. This is taken out of context. Is it? Sarah asked quietly. Because to me, it sounds like a husband plotting how to gain control of money that doesn't belong to him by attacking his wife's character. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Daniel, I said, breaking the silence, do you remember what you said about me in that office? His jaw clenched. Emma, you're being dramatic. I was just venting. Joking. Planning, I corrected. You were planning. And you were cheating. He flinched like I'd slapped him. You don't know what you heard. I know enough, I said. I know enough to understand that the man I thought I was married to disappeared a long time ago. Sarah slid another document toward him. These, she said, are preliminary divorce papers. Emma has already set protections in place for her assets. Given the evidence of your intentions, any attempt to challenge that will not look good in court. He stared at the papers, then at me. You're going to throw away our marriage over money, he demanded. I took a deep breath. No, I said. I'm ending our marriage because you already threw it away. Long before the money ever arrived. He lunged for my hand across the table. Emma, come on. We can fix this. You know I was just stressed. We've been broke for so long. I said things I didn't mean. You're my wife. We're a team, remember? His words sounded almost exactly like the ones he had used years ago when we were struggling. But something was different now. I wasn't the same woman anymore. I gently pulled my hand back. We were a team, I said quietly. Until you decided the game was only about you. He stared at me, his face twisting as the reality sank in. The money was out of his reach. The story he had built in his head, the one where he controlled everything, had just crumbled. For once, he was the one who looked small. And I was the one who finally felt free. The weeks that followed were messy, but not in the way he'd planned. There were calls, angry messages, late-night attempts to show up at the apartment I'd moved into. But each time, there was a lock he didn't have a key for, a lawyer who answered before I did, a barrier he hadn't expected. The divorce went through faster than he'd imagined. The recording, the documented plans he'd already laid out with his own lawyer, and his ongoing relationship with his coworker painted a clear picture. He tried to argue that he deserved a share of the winnings. The court saw something different. A man who had tried to position himself as the gatekeeper of money he didn't earn, by undermining the woman who did. In the end, he received a small, fair settlement based on the years we'd been together. Not a cent more. No control. No access to my accounts. No power over my future. The woman he'd been seeing quietly disappeared from his side when it became clear that the new life he'd promised wasn't going to be funded the way she'd hoped. As for me, first I thought the money would feel like a shield, like armor. In some ways it did. I paid off every debt I'd ever had. I bought my mother a small house where she could finally plant her flowers without wondering if a landlord would complain. I funded a scholarship program in my old neighborhood, for kids like me who had big dreams and small wallets. I traveled for the first time in my life. Not to escape, but to breathe. I sat on beaches, on train seats, on the steps of old buildings in cities I'd only ever seen in pictures, and I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who believed love meant staying loyal even when the other person had quietly checked out. I realized something important. The real win wasn't the 50 million. It was waking up to the truth before I handed my life, and my future, to someone who saw me as an obstacle instead of a partner. I used to think being soft was a weakness. That letting people in, trusting them, believing in second chances made me an easy target. Now I see it differently. My softness let me hope, love, and forgive. But my strength let me walk away when that hope was being used against me. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Money doesn't change people. It reveals them. Showed me who my husband really was. Showed me who I really was. It showed me who I could become when I stopped apologizing for protecting myself. When I look back on that day outside his office, standing in the hallway, listening to laughter and lies and plans meant to trap me, I don't just remember the pain. I remember the moment I pressed record. The moment I chose not to burst in, not to cry, not to beg. The moment I decided I would not be the victim in his story. I would be the author of my own. And now, whenever someone says, "You're so lucky," I smile a little. Yes, I'm lucky. Not because I won $50 million. But because, when the noises behind that office door changed everything, I listened. And I finally chose myself.